Tutankhamun's burial site lies 400 miles south of Cairo's Grand Egyptian Museum, in the Valley of the Kings. Chris Naunton has come to these desert hills to see where all the treasures from Tutankhamun's tomb were first gathered over 3,000 years ago. They lay undisturbed until the archaeologist Howard Carter first discovered the long hidden entrance to the young pharaoh's tomb.
Even though I must have been here dozens of times now, it's still a thrill to come down that descending passageway every time. And it's difficult not to try to imagine what it must have been like for Howard Carter coming into this tomb.
The tomb was so full, it took Carter and his team 10 years to remove the mass of treasures and haul them across the desert back to Cairo. But as the excavation progressed, Carter was hampered by the size of the site. The burial chamber was so cramped, the team could barely fit around the gilded shrines. It was soon clear this was an unusual tomb for such a powerful ruler of ancient Egypt. The fact that Tutankhamun's tomb is so small and badly prepared has long puzzled Egyptologists. At the Grand Egyptian Museum, some of the artifacts might provide a clue. This consignment of objects from the tomb contains shabtis, models of servants intended to serve the pharaoh after death. There are more than 400 of these small figures, many of which have never been displayed before. Each one should look like Tutankhamun, bearing the same face as his death mask.
I think it's funny with the googly eyes.
But they've raised questions for Salima Ikram.
The idea is that these should all look like Tutankhamun, but you can clearly see a lot of variety here. So, although the paint job's similar, the faces are very different because that one's got a pointy nose and that one's got a differently shaped mouth. Some faces are more delicately formed and slightly more feminine even than his. Others are a bit more robust. So there is a question as to whether some of them might have been made for someone else.
It seems the leader of an ancient empire may have been buried with objects never intended for him.
You do see reuse in tomb material fairly frequently, especially in the non-royal corpus, but it seems a bit odd to do this in a royal burial.
The conservators at the Grand Egyptian Museum are now trying to establish how much of Tutankhamun's burial treasure originally belonged to someone else. Existing estimates are staggering. Over 1,000 items, a quarter of the contents of the tomb, are second-hand.
At this point, it's very difficult to be precise about how many items might have been made for someone else and he used, because it's only now that we are looking even more closely at these artifacts. And so we are slowly coming into the process of saying, well, this might belong to someone else, and it clearly belongs to someone else. So we really have to look at each object individually and very carefully.
It seems the tomb workers, pressed for time, resorted to reusing goods to boost Tutankhamun's store of treasures for the afterlife. That backs up evidence already gathered of what seems like a botched burial. Away from Cairo at the Griffith Institute in Oxford, there are more clues that shortcuts were taken in Tutankhamun's tomb. Chris Naunton has come to study the original notes Howard Carter made as he first assessed the king's burial chamber.
It's absolutely incredible drawing, which was made by Carter himself, is a kind of a plan view of the assemblage of shrines, sarcophagus, and coffins that were found in the burial chamber in the tomb.
Carter carefully noted how Tutankhamun's body bearing his death mask was interred in 3 coffins, placed one inside the other, like Russian dolls. The coffins were then encased in a stone sarcophagus inside a set of gilded shrines. In theory, they should have fit perfectly inside one another, but Carter found otherwise.
When he had removed the coffins from inside the sarcophagus, he began to notice that something wasn't quite right. And as he says here, the top edge of the feet of the lid had been chipped away in places, they being too high to allow the lid of the sarcophagus to be placed on the sarcophagus. It seems the coffin was too big for the sarcophagus and it wasn't possible to place the lid down.
Tutankhamun, the head of a powerful empire, was given an undersized sarcophagus, which couldn't even hold his outer coffin. And the middle coffin raises more questions.